Welcome back to The Count. I'm Lydia Serrani. We're now moving on to story number 2 in our countdown. America last. Why is every single deal brokered by Joe Biden good for our enemies and bad for the American people? When Biden authorized a disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, he left behind our allies and a vast array of weapons for the Taliban. He also, don't forget, let a Chinese spy balloon make its way across the country for days. Meantime, love him or hate him, President Trump always put America first in all of his policy decisions. And then we got Joe Biden. Iran got 5 prisoners and $6 billion, clearly a surefire way to incentivize more hostages to be taken by our enemies. Let's bring in our experts. Lisa Daftari, counterterrorism and foreign policy expert and editor-in-chief at Foreign Desk. Also joining us, foreign policy expert Harley Lippman. Thank you guys for joining us. I'll start off with you first, Lisa. $6 billion for 5 prisoners. So explain, I know they're saying this is not taxpayer money. It was $6 billion in frozen money. But why was this such a bad deal?
Okay, so to start, a lot of people don't know this. And to anybody who tells you, were we going to leave those poor American Iranians in prisons? We had to get them home safe. Yes, we had to get them home safe. But to start with, this was already a lopsided deal, meaning the 5 Iranians that we were releasing from the United States were worth much more in terms of security than the 5 Iranian Americans who went over to visit family and of course were taking in and had bogus charges propped up against them. So already it was a lopsided deal. We allowed $6 billion to be unfrozen. Why is that such a big deal? Well, we know where it's going to be used. It's not going to be used on the people of Iran. It's not going to be used on humanitarian efforts. It's going to be used for making more weapons to sell to Russia. It's going to be used to prop up more of their terror proxies in the region, like the Houthis, like Hezbollah, like Hamas, and the list goes on. And we know that it's going to go towards their own nuclear weapons program. This is what they do. They use it for their own nefarious activities, and this is exactly what happens. 80 million people, the majority of which the Iranian people, came out onto the streets. We just commemorated the 1-year anniversary of the Masa Amini protests. It's a revolution going on inside Iran. But the Biden administration decided to ignore the people, ignore their calls for regime change, and instead empowered and emboldened a regime that held its head up high. President Raisi marched into New York this week at the United Nations General Assembly, and he felt like he definitely got the better part of that deal.
Absolutely. And Harley, so when you break it down, it's $1.2 billion per American. What kind of message is Joe Biden sending the rest of the world when he brokers this kind of bad deal?
Well, the message is quite clear. If you want to get your people out of jail that may be in the United States, you just have to kidnap an innocent American, and you're going to get as it looks now, over $1 billion per American hostage. And we have to be mindful of the fact that there's no moral equivalent. Remember, 5 Iranians are being exchanged for 5 Americans. The 5 Americans are innocent. The 5 Iranians that are being released are guilty. We have rule of law. They have had a trial, they had lawyers, and they were found guilty. So we have to start with there's no moral equivalent. We have to start with that. But I think the bigger picture here is that the Biden administration is focused more on crisis management as opposed to crisis resolution. And what does crisis resolution mean? It means, one, we support the Iranian people. It was just said, this time is very meaningful because it was just a year ago, you had the largest protests in Iran since 1979 when the Ayatollahs took over. So you need to be behind the Iranian people. And it sends a very disturbing message to the people and to the leadership that Biden doesn't bring it up. Instead, he talks about climate change. Also, management resolution means we stand by our allies in the region, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others. We give them all the means necessary to counter the threats from Iran. And then lastly, we have to really enforce UN sanctions against Iran and be serious about it. So that would be a good step in the right direction if we were serious about crisis resolution as opposed to just crisis management.
I want to get, but that's such great points there. I want to get both of your reactions to this. As opposed to Joe Biden's America Last policies, his predecessor, President Trump, He put America first, and he took to Truth Social to slam the prisoner swap deal, writing in part, "I brought 58 hostages home from many different countries. Once you pay, you always pay, and many more hostages will be taken." Lisa, what do you think about what Trump said here, what he wrote?
He's absolutely right. Now, look, there's a price tag on every American head, wherever they go, in any rogue nation of the world. This is what we did. We just said, this is our form of diplomacy. This is our policy from the White House. I'll take this one step further. This wasn't just to bring home those Americans. This was an ideological move to unfreeze assets to the regime. And as we saw at the UN, Biden talked about climate change. He had 2 sentences to say about Iran's regime, and the only thing he said is that they cannot get a nuclear weapon. He is only setting the stage for another nuclear deal, another JCPOA like we had under President Obama in 2015, and he's setting the stage. They can't have a nuclear deal. Therefore, before the end of Biden's term, he will want to strike up another nuclear deal and give them, wait for it, many more billions of dollars. So this is ideologically driven. This is the way the Biden administration, and before them, the Obama administration, wanted to deal with Iran's regime. They wanted to make the Shiites in the region more powerful. They turned their backs on Israel. They turned their backs on Saudi Arabia. And now we have the Abraham Accords. So we have a whole long list of moderate Arab nations who are against Iran becoming more powerful in the region. And again, ignoring the people of Iran and what they're telling us about their regime.
Right. And Harley, 20 seconds to your reaction as well.
Yeah, I think, what's critical is we really have to stop Iran from getting the bomb. And the problem is this administration, if there is going to be a new deal, what I think is even more disturbing, as bad as what just happened, is the likelihood there'll be a freeze where Iran is now an enrichment, which means they're on the precipice of being able to make a bomb instead of a pushback to where it should have been. That's what's important.
Absolutely. Lisa Daftari, Harley Lippman, thank you both for a great conversation there.